We're making traditional pecan pralines today. So the recipe is 1 cup of brown sugar, 1 cup of white sugar, 2/3 cup of evaporated milk. Now in New Orleans, evaporated milk, if you ask for cream in some older people's households, you will still get evaporated milk.
Okay.
So I assume that you can use cream too for this recipe. It's a very, very simple recipe. The only tricky thing is, we're just going to keep cooking this.
You want me to stir that?
Want to? We stir it. You dissolve it first. And then it cooks several minutes. I was always taught that you cook it to the soft ball stage,
Okay.
which on a candy thermometer here is 238 degrees or so. But the fact of the matter is, in my experience, I have found that if you only cook it to soft ball stage, you're going to have some pretty thin, pretty thin pralines.
Okay.
Or you're going to have to put it back in the pot and cook it some more. So I always cook it to a little bit more than that. And of course, we never had a candy thermometer.
So what was used before?
We actually dropped a little bit in some cold water, and it makes a soft ball.
Okay.
And you can see it. Stage. Now this is pretty frustrating because, like I said, after many times of having to scrape watery pralines off the paper and put them back to cook a little more, I've come to the conclusion that you need to get it more than softball stage. And it's really funny because the reason I wanted to get this recipe down is when we made them for the event, Kelly called afterwards and said, can you teach me how to make these? And I just had to laugh because, I mean, I learned it from my great aunt and my aunt, and those people were Kelly's great aunt and great great aunt, and it's just a recipe we all knew how to make growing up. And so I called her father, my cousin Raul in New Orleans, and I told him the story. It was like your cycle of life story.
Yeah, exactly.
And he said, well, that's funny. He said, because I have never gotten the hang of it. I just can't make them. And they're just really simple. The only tricky part is getting them to soft ball.
Okay.
And I suspect it's because
They're not really
you
soft
really have to cook them a little beyond that. And he probably never did that. You can see it's at really quite a boil now.
And we've been cooking for 4 or 5 minutes now.
Over a pretty high heat. Well, it's getting up there. You have to stir the whole time, and I sort of scrape down the sides of the pot a little. It won't crystallize like if you're cooking just sugar because of the milk in it. But yeah, see, we're barely hitting, we're about 215 now. And I remember Nanny Marion and Aunt Mamie used to always lift up the spoon and see how much of a ball it was making dripping off. And see, it's beginning to get thicker. It's taking a little bit longer for those little drips to drip down. I think they're about ready. Let's pour one in. See, you have a little ball there now. You have to work very quickly at this point. These may start hardening up before we actually get them all poured, but if they do, I'll just add a little water. I added about, I would say, about 2 tablespoons of butter to it. I'm going to add a pinch of salt just because you need a little, it's unsalted butter and you always need a little salt to even out things. I'll whip the butter until it melts in there. I'm going to add a little vanilla. And then, potent vanilla. Then I'm going to add, Uncle Reese says he always adds more pecans than I do, so we're putting in a lot of pecans today. This looks like too much to me, but anyway.
I'm a pecan fan too, though.
And you know what? I think these are a little thick, so I'm just going to add a little water right from the beginning. And I need a spoon really quickly to pour them with. Can you get me a tablespoon?
Oh, they smell so good at this point.
And they just work really quickly. I'm pouring them by the spoonful onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. Yeah. I know I'm making a mess, but it's better to work quickly because they do harden as you're pouring them.
Go ahead.
We can share.
No, it's fine.
You'll burn your tongue. These are so much better than those watery thin ones you'll get if you order them from one of those commercial places in the French Quarter.
And kids just love scraping that pan clean.
Okay, you can
You'll,
scrape the pan
you'll
clean.
never have a problem getting that pan cleaned.
So 5 minutes of cooling. Now that these are set, we just peel them right off the parchment, or you can use wax paper if you don't have parchment. And yummy. There you go. That's your pralines.